Hello again, rail fans. You know, in an era where trains can sometimes look the same one after another, I like to go out and check locations to discover new places instead of just the trains themselves. So I kind of did that recently. I set out in May to scope out the CSX A line between Lakeland and Palatka, Florida. It's a part of Florida that I just haven't done much rail fanning in. So I set out to meet M457, daily local freight out of Waycross to Taft Yard in Orlando. Taft is what I really wanted to check out. The plan got scrambled up a little bit when I was headed out I-4 and rolling over the hill. M457 hit the Stokes defect detector, so I knew I had to jut into Lakeland, down to Lakeland Junction there to catch him. That's where I started the day.
CSX detector, milepost 849.7, no defects. Repeat, no defects. Total axles 372. Detector out.
It was still early when M457 rolled into Lakeland Junction. He is daily mixed freight out of Waycross, Georgia for Orlando's Taft Yard, with a stop to work Baldwin Yard along the way. 457 normally carries a large block of refrigerated boxcars, but today only has one. Rumor has it that McDonald's receives giant shipments of frozen French fries on 457, but apparently not today. This train is a typical Florida consist these days: high cube boxcars with merchandise, building material including steel, lumber, and drywall, tank cars with industrial and hospitality ingredients, and large amounts of minerals like rock, sand, and cement. The building in this state never seems to stop. On the bottom of the train are auto racks with brand new cars. They might be from Michigan, but are just as likely from Kentucky, South Carolina, or Alabama. I really wanted to see what 457 does when he gets to Orlando, so I dashed out to I-4 and headed east. I actually made it to Taft way ahead of M457. The entrance to Taft Yard is now in CFRC territory. The Central Florida Rail Corridor now owns the A-line from Poinciana up to Deland and operates Sunrail commuter trains over it. CSX sold off the 63-mile segment of the A-line in 2012, but retained its two major yards in Orlando and Sanford. The CFRC has done major upgrades on the infrastructure, especially track and signals. And they've launched a major driver education campaign about stopping on tracks when a traffic light is near a crossing. Here at Land Street Road, the message is on the signal bungalow, and drivers are getting the message. Even though the state has modernized the facilities here, there are still artifacts of the past. An old Atlantic coastline whistle post is still on the job. But across the street is CSX boss Joe Henrichs' display of the railroad's new motto, loud and clear. On the south yard lead, loaded rock hoppers sit, tied down and waiting for delivery to the customer. Looking northward at the yard entrance, the lead is protected by both an electrically locked switch and a derail. I'm not 100% on the layout here, but I think those two tracks in the middle are the number 1 and number 2 mains. The track on the far right is named the service track, which I believe in other places it's called an industrial lead. 0935 and M457 peaks around the curve at the Taft signal. The CFRC dispatcher has him approaching on the number 1 main, but in another minute he looks like he's crossing over to the number 2. And then one more crossover to the service track. Again, I'm not familiar with the yard layout here, so I'm not exactly sure what he's doing. Local rail fan Logan and his dad were also waiting on 457. Logan then explained to me why the train has moved over to the service track. 457 always drops his auto racks first, and that requires a trip over to the TDSI ramp. Unlike in Tampa or Jacksonville, Orlando's TDSI yard is right next to the CSX yard, and I mean right across the street. As 457 gets closer to that TDSI lead, he slows the train down to a crawl. The crossing signal circuit for Orange Avenue is apparently very short. so the train has to tiptoe up to it to make sure it activates and gets the gates down before he rolls out over the pavement. Upon seeing the creeping locomotive, some drivers decide immediately they're not going to wait for this and turn around. He comes to almost a complete stop to let his conductor get off, walk ahead, and open the fence gate. TDSI yards usually have plenty of tight security around them. M457 will pull his entire train into the automobile yard, drop the auto racks into 2 tracks, and then come back out on a north yard lead. He basically goes into the yard, makes his drop-off, does a giant U-turn, and comes back out to the Sunrail main line. From there, he'll drop the rest of his consist in the tracks of Taft Yard. About 45 track miles to the north of Taft Yard is Deland, a combined Sunrail and Amtrak station. This is the northernmost limit of the CFRC territory. From here, CSX resumes control of the A-line all the way to Richmond, Virginia. In 2024, Sunrail completed construction of a new platform and a station track here. And on August 9th, they opened commuter train service to and from Deland. The existing station building remains as Amtrak's passenger depot. This spot was at one time Deland Junction on the timetable. Right at the station, inside the yard limits, a 3-mile spur track breaks out of the main line and goes east towards downtown. Several passenger depots were on the spur over the years. Now there are only 1 or 2 customers, but they still keep the line alive. Sunrail now serves Deland with 20 arrivals and 19 departures every weekday. Arriving at 15:30 is P320 northbound. The little train is routed onto the station track for its stop here. Sunrail 109 is a Motive Power Industries M36PH-3C. Sunrail's first order of locomotives were rebuilt from Mark GP40s. Since Deland is the northern end of the line, the train simply reverses direction for its trip back south. The engineer operates the southbound train from a specially designed remote control station in the end of the bottom passenger car. These are called cab cars. They're equipped with marker lights, plus headlights and ditch lights for bi-directional running. A couple of minutes before departure time, the train gets a signal to leave. The aspect is approach limited, which indicates proceed, approaching the next signal not exceeding limited speed. Another minute or two and he rolls out south toward DeBerry, Sanford, Lake Mary, Winter Park, Orlando, and Kissimmee. A week earlier, I drove back to Palatka, where they were celebrating National Train Day. This part of the A-line gets a few CSX freights and 6 Amtraks every day. I arrived at the downtown depot in time to see Amtrak 97, the southbound Silver Meteor, arriving. The station's location and the train's length are just enough to cause the gates to go down on the US 17 crossing and stay there for the whole time of the stop, which today totaled 4 minutes and 26 seconds. My friend Miller Norton took us on a driving tour of Palatka's railroading points of interest and then recommended lunch at Angel's. The sign says Florida's oldest diner. When we got there at 1:30, the place was packed, but we found room outside at a covered picnic table. The menu is all diner, nothing chefy here. Most of our table ordered the club sandwich, which I would have loved, but I got a cheeseburger platter instead. It came with fries, 2 onion rings, and a drink. I was not sorry for choosing the cheeseburger, delicious at $14 out the door. After the lunch rush was over and all the customers had gone, I got a little tour of this classic old diner, one of the coolest I have ever seen. One of the places Miller showed us was the Krill Avenue underpass. Just under a half-mile south of the passenger depot, the A-line flies over Krill Avenue, or State Road 20. It's a classic coastline trestle with the name still very legible. The structure actually supported 3 tracks across this road at one time. The support beams for the other 2 are still there, but that's all. A novelty is this pedestrian viaduct, basically a giant culvert. At 1549, it was Amtrak 98, the northbound Silver Meteor, rolling into its Palatka station stop. These type of bridges always make a very cool shot. Miller also showed me Kirby Street, the next crossing south from the underpass. When I came back here, a local L711 was pounding south. Places like this let you hear that big EMD engine working hard all by itself. This local out of Moncrief Yard in Jacksonville was bringing down a train of empty intermodal cars. Coming out of the Krill Avenue Bridge, the track swooshes around to hit Kirby Street at a shallow angle, then keeps curving on its way south to get lined up to cross the St. Johns River at Buffalo Bluffs. L711, with its one SD40-3 locomotive, was hauling empty intermodal spine cars and container well cars to be put in storage. I got word they were headed for Huntington Siding south of here, but that's not where they went. After Kirby Street, I loaded up and gave chase. I caught up with L711 as he was entering the siding at Satsuma, the first pass track south of the Buffalo Bluffs Bridge. We both waited there about 15 minutes when the radio crackled with Amtrak 52 coming up from the south.
Amtrak 52, got a clear Lake Como.
8 more minutes, and here he was.
Fire J. Field 52, clear all the way. Satsuma. Clear all the way through Satsuma, field 52 out.
When Auto Train passed, M711 got a signal to exit the south end of the siding and come back north on the main. I can only guess that the crew got word at some point to just leave the intermodal cars in Satsuma instead of Huntington. On the way back to Tampa, I pulled into a place in Lakeland I'd wondered about a long time. This bait and tackle shop has the unmistakable look of a red lobster. I'd read a news article about the world's first red lobster being in Lakeland and assumed this was it. But a conflicting story puts Red Lobster number 1 on Florida Avenue, close to downtown. I'll report back on this when I get confirmation, but still, this is an awesome place for a red lobster. right at the water's edge of Big Lake Parker in Lakeland, Florida. I really want to learn more about that Red Lobster location. It's right on US 92 in Lakeland, near the old McIntosh power plant. I'm telling you, as a kid, I loved Red Lobster. And in fact, for most of my adult life, it's just, I've just always been a big fan of Red Lobster. So I like to find out kind of where it came from and where it's gone over the years. Okay, hit the like button if you like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done that. Share the video with your friends, please. Send them a link. That's easy to do. And hit the little bell down there to be notified whenever I post a new video. And let's make plans, just you and me, to meet up again somewhere soon, somewhere out there on the high iron. And until then, this is Danny Harmon, out.